Welcome to the Conference Through Health podcast. This is your host, Jerry Snyder. In this episode, I talked to Dr. Bilge Gregory. She, as she explains, was an ER doctor with many years of experience who went through her own personal trauma, injuries, health issues that led her to change her focus and become a very much more holistic treating doctor, holistic, like we talk about is I just found it was fascinating and great conversation. As you can tell, I'm excited about it. We talked about so much holistic ways to change and take control of your health, both things that you're doing on the physical level, with foods and medicine, exercise, and then things that you can do on the mental and emotional level, and how much that plays a part in really your overall health and where you land when you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, as far as, are you the healthy individual that's able to go out and do and have fun things, or are you the person who is stuck and bedridden and, just for lack of a better way to say it, waiting to die because you've not allowed your body to manifest itself into a healthy being, or a healthy meat suit, as you might say. So we talk about a ton of different ways that you can take care of yourself and take charge of your own health. But I found her to be just a wealth of information. She taught me a few things. I know she's going to be able to either teach or reinforce things for you that's going to help you become healthier in the long run. So I hope you share this with your friends, because this is a fascinating and great episode. Well, thank you for being on the Confidence to Health podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So before we get into like the nitty gritty of how people can help their health in a holistic manner, tell us a little bit about how you got into, like, what was your passion behind getting into medicine and being able to help people this way?
Well, I'm a daughter of two doctors, and although they didn't necessarily push me to be a physician, they definitely wanted me to do something involving some higher education, even from a young age. So I kind of knew from a very, very young age. I was 2 when I would answer the phone. This is Dr. Bibe. Nice. And you may or may not have seen my email address is BIBEDOC. So Bibe right. Comes from that, from me not being able to pronounce my name.
That's funny.
But so I never wavered in my decision in wanting to be a doctor. The major change happened in terms of how I practice medicine.
Right.
In the mid 2015s. Basically, I'm a board certified emergency medicine doctor who started practicing after residency in a local group here at Chandler Regional and Mercy Gilbert. We were partners in a group. We were physician owned, but I really didn't think I would be a victim of the burnout. But ultimately what happened was I was hospitalized in September of 2015 for a heart arrhythmia, which led me to fall, collapse, and crush my skull in 4 places, be concussed and hospitalized. And I was a mess for a little while, and then a month later, I was right back in the ER and kind of questioning where to go with all of it. And then less than a year later, woke up with pain in my shoulder that I thought was something I'd slept wrong. It was like in the side of my neck, but it really had turned out within about 24 hours, my disc at C3-4 shot into my arm, compressing the nerve.
Oh, wow.
And I almost lost all my function in that arm, and ultimately had, and it was severe pain, ultimately had emergency surgery releasing that disc. So basically, the reason I'm telling you these dramatic occurrences in my life is those were the things that really woke me up to what the universe was trying to teach me in terms of what are you going to do? Like, where are you going with your life? And we're trying to tell you you're no longer in alignment with your path, and you need to make a big change. So that's kind of how I saw it all. And although I wasn't really clear on where to move on with that, what it allowed me to do was start thinking about how I can practice medicine, because I never wanted to stop being a doctor.
Right.
So in 2017 was when those thought processes happened, and I was still working shifts in the ER. And ultimately, I thought I was going to do concierge medicine. And when I contacted one of my fellow ER doctors who was kind of in the same place emotionally and He had moved on and started moving on into doing cosmetic procedures and all whatnot. And so when I asked him for a little bit of help on some non-surgical, like injectable type procedures, he told me that he had also been trained in high definition lipo. Okay. And would I want to see it? And I thought, well, this is something I'd definitely be interested in, because plastic surgery was one of my considerations growing in med school, and my dad's a surgeon. So it wasn't something I couldn't, and I'm very good with my hands because procedurally speaking, that's what I love to do. And then I also do art. So that cool. I think it kind of followed along. Yeah. But in the same vein, as I'm learning, what I realized is one of the things I really enjoy doing. I love doing it. I also left the emergency department after 20 years and started over, like basically opening a door to a possibility with no guarantees of career or income.
Nice. Little scary.
So that's also maybe the segue into leading into holistic medicine, because I started I started being away from the typical allopathic doctor scenario, obviously not being influenced by that, not being influenced by hospital type medicine, all those things. And over the course of years, and ultimately, there was a lot of self-healing that was required of me around that time, because I'm only really telling you what happened to me physically, but emotionally speaking, I went through what I considered much more traumatic concerns. I had a major rupture of relationship with some family members, estrangement. It affected my son, my one and only son, and my family tremendously. And so, I had to make some life changes that weren't just about how I practice medicine. Right. So in the course of that time, when I was making those major changes, I was also struggling from age 16 until probably in my early 40s, severe acid reflux and peptic ulcer disease. The reason I'm getting to that point is because the self-healing comes through that. I started learning about mind-body healing. I started learning about quantum physics. I was reading books like You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza, whose story is extremely intriguing for anybody who doesn't know about it. I would just suggest to go look him up and how he became to be who he is. Right. And then another person who has a really profound impact on me is Bruce Lipton. He is a cellular biologist and also considered the father of epigenetics. And thankfully, reading a book like his, he used a lot of scientific resources that I could feel comfortable applying my knowledge to, and not just coming from a super esoteric, feel good sort of source. Not that I don't love those now, but at that time I needed a little bit more science to back up like where I was going in the direction of all of that. Right. And I learned that the body can create any pharmaceutical that you would be able to purchase in the pharmacy industry. And that if we neglected Newtonian physics, which is dogma, and what medical schools are taught, and moved on to quantum physics, you can realize how much healing is involved, because we are all basically little vibrating tornadoes of energy, every little part of us. We are not technically solid matter. Which means we have an impact on anything in our bodies, and it starts at the cellular level. So once you start believing in that type of healing, you start understanding your impact on it, which is what happened to me. I started meditating into the possibility of being cured from that disease, and I literally did it in a matter of days. Something that I found myself dependent on, taking Pepcid, Prilosec, seeing GI doctors, being offered surgical options to tie up my esophagus, which I didn't take, but you can imagine. And ultimately, within a matter of days, this was after I had moved, after I was still going through that other stuff emotionally with family. Right. I became symptom free for the first time in 25 years. Wow. And so basically, I started understanding how much of an impact I had on my healing. And then I started realizing how much I can empower others to do the same. And historically speaking, not very many people know this, but the practice of medicine, when medical schools were at their earliest stages in the early 1900s, people like Carnegie and Rockefeller had a tremendous impact on not only the economy, but on the curricula of medical school. And at that time, medicine was considered to be a combination of three specialties. One is electromagnetic fields, second is nutrition, and third, which was kind of newer at the time, petroleum-based pharmaceuticals. And what they decided was, and it's been there since then, is that there is no significant way to, quote, monetize electromagnetic fields or nutrition. Right. And they asked that medical schools abandon those disciplines and only practice the fields of pharmaceutical and surgery to create health. But a lot of people are realizing this now after COVID, that the pharmaceutical industry is not there for healing. Right. It's there to keep you present, keep you going back for the same or other medications to, it's basically to get a lifelong. It's their cycle, like you said, it's a monetary cycle. And so it's, if they can get you well enough just so you can get sick again, then they've got a customer for life. Exactly. And what's unfortunate is, although many medical doctors, their intention is to help, back then they were considered quacks if they practiced outside of this realm. And so it became like a way to shame and use fear tactics to push people into a certain belief system where now they don't even know the historical impact. They just think that if you practice outside of the realm, you're a quack. So you can imagine, if I had adopted these belief systems when I was still working in the hospital, I'm not sure how long I would have lasted, or they would have, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think either my belief system would have changed and I would have had to leave anyways, or I would have been shamed or guilted back into the old belief system. Right. So I think COVID has had a tremendous impact on waking people up too, in terms of what's considered health and wellness and what's not. Yeah. And also, I'm a true believer in being the change. So, I mean, and I always ask people, how many doctors have you met who've been your caregiver, where you felt a lack of connection, a lack of resonation, and then they make you feel a certain way about your practices, etc. Yet on the other end, they're guilty of the same or something else that has just as much of an impact on health. And certainly stress is one of them. So that's what I do love about Bruce Lipton, is because when you start impacting the stress, the cortisol and the histamine system in the body, a lot of chronic illnesses come out of that. And we're learning even now, cardiovascular disease, this baloney that they've created by pushing cholesterol as the problem, those are all becoming more and more to be not true. Right. And it was to support the pharmaceutical industry in their use of statins, et cetera. Yep. But when you really start going back to quantum physics and understanding energy and stress, again, everything that happens in terms of your thoughts create a reaction or a chemical composition change in your body, and those create physical consequences, right? So one study they had done was specifically on rats, and they were feeding them significant amounts of fat foods, and they were thickening their blood with fat because they wanted to see the impact it had on their cardiovascular system. Strangely, one group of rats was not getting sick, no matter how thick their blood got. And in the meantime, they were also studying or testing their histamine levels, which is histamine is something in allergic reactions, but also in the stress system, right? Right. Turns out that was the one group of rats whose histamine levels were extremely low. And why? It was because the lab tech for that group of rats was petting them and giving them love. Oh, wow. Throughout the entirety of the study. So they happened to have lower histamine levels. So it really didn't matter how much cholesterol they were being given. They weren't getting sick. Wow.
Well, and that just goes to show, like, because I know a lot of people, as they, we tend to talk to people that are old in age and be like, what's your secret? How did you get there? Like, how'd you make it to 100 or 105? And it's so many of them say it was my connection of friends.
Yes.
And it's not
Absolutely.
necessarily because, and some of them might be like, oh, well, I smoked until I was 80, or I did this, or it was, 2 glasses of red wine a night. And you've got like people going, oh, but there's doctors that say don't drink alcohol. And this happened.
Right.
She lived this long. How can you? But then you find out like, but I've had my core friends for 40 years,
Yes.
and we get together every week for lunch or whatever. And it's like, that plays a huge part in it, no matter what else you do.
Humans were meant to be with one another. We're all one, in my opinion. And actually one of the most profoundly damaged babies and children that we know of that have been studied are the ones that have been neglected. So, not sure if you've ever heard of Dr. Emoto, but he talks a lot about water and how energy obviously is transferred in water. So I'm big on water, and I happen to have a really cool medical grade water system called Kangen. I love it. But anyways, my point was that's how I started learning more about water. And since we're 80% water, and so they started doing studies where they would sing or pray or play certain types of music. So again, everything is vibration, and the structure of the water would change according to the vibration. So imagine if that's the case where two separate scenarios, an older person who's isolated in a nursing home or very little visitation, usually are not thriving, right? They're usually consistently sick, etc. But the older adult that still engages, goes to dance class, hangs out with friends, where does that come from? That comes from vibration, right? So you're the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. So ultimately, when you are amongst those who build you up, lift you, appreciate you, value you in the way that you do reciprocally, then that's where much more disease healing can come. And I also love to teach people this, because even though I do lipo for a living now, it doesn't mean I can't still be a caregiver or a health caregiver in other ways, because I tell them, I'm like, this is your meat suit and I'm here to make you feel better. But what I'm helping create is a change in perception, right?
Right.
So you change your thoughts and you change your life. And I've had cosmetic surgery on a variety of things myself, and I understand what an impact that perception had on me. So again, I try going back to teaching people. I love learning about maybe their illnesses that they deal with outside of just coming in to talk more about lipo, because I use this book. It's really interesting. It's called Metaphysical Anatomy. It's basically a dictionary of diagnoses. And in the dictionary of diagnoses, you can refer to specific diagnoses and read what emotional processes are associated with that chronic illness. You'd be amazed.
Oh, yeah, imagine.
Amazed how close it is to people's actual life scenario. Mine certainly was. I didn't get the book until after my peptic ulcer symptoms had been cured. But I went back to read it, and realized the life I was living. I was like, oh, it felt like a diary. So if my symptoms do come back, which they have, in fact, they came back in the last couple months, I would say this fall has been very interesting, and maybe not just for me, but for a lot of people. There's been a lot of change, a lot of removing of masks, like revealing of things, questioning your boundaries and whether or not they're high enough or worthy enough, questioning things like self-worth and value. I feel like this fall has been real big on that for me. So I don't know. I have a feeling other people are dealing with it too. But basically I hope it goes back to, hey, when you come to see me, I'm going to teach you things because of where I've been and what I've learned from the trauma. I turned that trauma into a growth process or an evolution process. And if I can do it, you can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So I'm here to teach people, like, you don't have to go to a doctor and feel disempowered. Like the only way out or the only way to fix your body is through the whatever they're offering you, especially if it doesn't feel good to you. I always say, trust your instincts. Instincts are huge, in my opinion, in terms of how you work in your life. And one phrase I tell people is, if it doesn't make you glow, you have to let it go and go with your flow.
Nice.
So when you meet people, you kind of know, okay, here's the thing. If you meet people and they like you, you'll know, right? But if they don't really like you, or if they have reservations about you, you'll be confused. And that's literally all you need to know. I think what we do sometimes is we put our focus on trying to figure out what other people are thinking about us or whatever. And it's not helpful because now you're projecting your thoughts on them anyways.
Yeah.
If you're confused, that's literally all you need to know. And that could be about any situation, regardless of meeting people or whatnot. If somebody asks you to perform a task or be somewhere and you hesitate, that's all you need to know.
Right.
So if you're saying yes,
very true.
Despite that, it's not that you shouldn't, but you're possibly making that yes choice based out of obligations or fears, and not necessarily because, oh yeah, I'm in.
Right.
I'll give you an example. I don't like golf. Just don't like it. I'm going to piss off a lot of people saying that, but if somebody offered me a day, like, let's spend the day going golfing, I'd be like, right. But if somebody told me, okay, Bilge, we're going to go hang out at the beach, we're going to scuba dive, and then when we're done, we're going to cook and have some great food and then dance by the seaside, I'd be like, I am so in. Like, I would never need to think more than half a second to be interested in that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So again, think when you kind of are challenged with things in life, and the same thing goes for when you're going to see a doctor and you're asking for health care, it could be related to cosmetic procedures, which are really important because then it's really your choice as to whether that's the doctor you go with. But trust those red flags. I've had so many interesting cases of people who either did or didn't trust their red flag, or they had a red flag about another friend who wanted them to go see that doctor. And it turns out that friend got, a negative consequence from the patient's red flag. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Something always goes down when you have those red flags. No,
it does. And it when you were talking about projecting, you're projecting your thoughts when you have that, like, in a lot of times it's because, like, you left the house knowing, okay, here's my faults, here's my issues for today. Whether you woke up and you've got bags under your eyes and you're like, oh my gosh, I look horrible today or whatever.
Yeah.
And if they hesitate, you automatically think, oh, they're judging me because of the way I look or the way I feel or the way I da. And you're reinforcing those negative thoughts, which is then again negatively impacting your health.
Right.
And so you're very sure. It's so true that, like, you just need to, they probably don't notice anything about what you think is negative about you.
Correct. Other than maybe the energy, right?
Right.
They're feeling something.
They're feeling it. Yeah. If you're projecting a bad energy because you're emotionally down or whatever, it's like, it doesn't even have to be like a sadness that's going on in your life or something, but just because you just don't feel right today.
Exactly.
Like they'll pick up on it, but we automatically sometimes think, oh, but they're judging me because of the way I look or my physical appearance or because of something I just said. And then we'd go down that negative path. And there's a lot to say about how much you spend thinking those negative thoughts, because it derails, like, the positive things happening in your life.
Absolutely.
Right. And you do become your thoughts. That's on both negative and positive, because I know people that have, and I've told people this, I'm like, just because everybody in your family has gotten cancer doesn't mean you're going to get cancer.
Exactly.
But if you think everybody in my family has had cancer, I'm going to get it someday, you're probably going to get cancer.
Yes.
Like, the chances are a lot higher because you're telling yourself, hey, go ahead and do it. And versus if you could sit there and say, like, nope, I'm not going to get sick. I'm not going to have this. I'm not going to have that. I don't care what it is. I'm not going to have it. Like, chances are you're going to live a much healthier life. You're literally talking about quantum medicine, right?
Yeah. I mean, what people still don't understand, and I think this also goes with doctors, not just lay people, is that's what epigenetics is about.
Right.
Did you know that less than 2% of all genetic diseases are actually genetic?
Right.
So although I have cancer in my family, although there's diabetes in my family and heart disease in my family, turning those genes on and off is up to me. Right?
Yep.
Genetics loads the gun, but it does not pull the trigger.
Right.
And people need to understand that things like cancer don't come from, we all have cancer cells in our body, by the way. I think people don't even realize that.
Yeah.
But it's our job, our body's job to recognize those processes. And remember, when the vibration is different in certain areas, it's either our body's going to adapt to it and grow it, or it's going to suppress it because it's not consistent with the rest of its environment.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one way to change that is obviously eating higher vibrational foods, fresh foods and things like that, right? And so you can navigate it that way. But if you're already in a spot where it's like, okay, I'm already feeling sick, I'm already feeling these, I know there's an imbalance and I need to address it quickly. Is that where things like IV therapy and hormone, is that where those things can come in and be like, not a Band-Aid so much, but just sort of a boost to help get you there?
Well, what I think is how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I guess my point is if you're really focused and intentional about your well-being, you're probably not just going to do one thing. Like, I'm not just going to have a good diet, right? Although I see a lot of people who think that all the answers come from that. No, it doesn't.
Right.
My focus or intention would be more about like, how can I feel good in a multitude of ways? And it's not just going to be about food. But food happens to be kind of like a discipline, right? So I'm big into intermittent fasting, right? So for me, that's a different discipline I choose. But ultimately, when people still get sick, I feel like that's when you can, if you're not used to being sick and let's say you do, I feel like you can absolutely overcome those ailments quicker because you have well-being tactics or techniques already in place.
Right.
And to be honest, knock on wood, I haven't really been sick in a little while. So I'm a big proponent of certain vitamins, specifically vitamin D, magnesium at night as well. But when I'm referring to things like getting sick, vitamin D has a tremendous impact.
Right.
And it's amazing. I don't know where you live. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. So most people assume that because I live in a place like this, that my vitamin D levels are high.
Right.
And I don't use sunscreen, by the way. I have for a long time. I'm a tan skin person. And I think being born in the 70s, it never really stuck with me. And now, of course, we're hearing things about sunscreen. So I'm like, sweet.
Yeah. Right.
But the bottom line is it never really, living where I live, didn't have a great impact on my immune system, meaning my vitamin D levels. And when I tested, I was like in the 20s. That's pretty low.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of infections come from like a lowered immune system, right? And vitamin D specifically happens to be one of the ones that most people don't really even know that they have until it's almost too late, right? Too late, meaning they're sick. Yeah. So for people who are just barely getting sick, I'm always into early intervention, meaning like as soon as you start feeling something, that's when you really need to get in there, right? Focus on your rest. If you keep fighting it and working past it, I think that can make things worse. I'm also a huge proponent of now, only in the recent past, telling people to absolutely avoid Tylenol. It's liver toxic and it decreases your glutathione. And glutathione is a huge antioxidant in the body. So for you to diminish one of your soldiers for your illness, So I'm not saying that fever reduction can't be treated, but again, there's other ways to do it, and it doesn't have to be Tylenol. My other is very much so. We've helped a lot of people who've gotten viral infections with IV therapy, but I also see the benefits in people who are very fit and healthy and really want to boost their energy levels and feeling good inside. So a lot of our patients are getting regular IVs for that, like working out, running a race, things of that nature. They just feel good. So that's a big reason I'm a huge proponent. And then when it comes to hormone therapy, I think it just goes back to a lot of people, we do men mostly, but a lot of people generally don't feel well. And there's so many non-specific symptoms associated with that, but all of them can come from the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, right?
Right.
And people may not know that the average male testosterone level has dropped significantly over the last 5 or 6 decades, whereas before, I think it was in the 50s, your average male testosterone level was in the 700s, and now we're approaching down to below 500s, which is
Wow.
technically therapeutic range,
Right.
if you think about it. But it also means that now these men are feeling unwell, but they don't know why. And a lot of them feel hesitancy in seeking out help because they're thinking it's not something they can change, but it's not true. There's so many ways, even in the older population, maybe not injecting them with bioidentical hormones, but certainly you can treat with creams and whatnot, bioidentical hormones, even in the older page population, like 70s plus.
Right.
And the amount of rejuvenation they feel, the sleep quality, their cholesterol levels, their body mass index, their, what is the word? Libido,
Yeah.
Took me a hot second. Like you said, it's all about who are you engaging with and who are you with. So of course, all of those things have an impact on your engaging with other people, whether it's, libido or non-sexually speaking, but all of those have such an impact on the well-being of a male. And same with the female. A lot of women get blown off too, saying you're fine, but they're not.
Right.
The only difference for me is that takes a much more complicated set of processes to address. And I know experts around. So that's one of the other reasons my company is named what it is, Vital Connection MD, because I'm not here to be the answer for all problems there are. I love connecting people with others, so for me, it's not a competition. People see me for what I'm good at, and then I'm happy to refer them out for the other things.
Right. Well, and so I'm in Waco, Texas. So I'm like, and a lot of people think that just like where you're at, that like you're getting enough sunlight all year round, when really, I mean, you are for some of the months if you're outside for a lot of the day. But otherwise you're not. And so, and I'm an athlete, and I take a daily vitamin D, calcium. I take a magnesium at night. And I'm and since Thanksgiving, I've been raw vegan, but I've been vegan for 5 years. And I'm just testing out the raw vegan thing just to see if it works or not. But so, I focus on my nutrition. I focus on getting all those things, but I know that I'm not getting enough. So I get to do more, right? To be able to,
you have to do something different.
You have to do something different. And, so it's like, it is something that just because the daily recommended allowance is at a certain level doesn't mean that's right for you.
Exactly.
And so you really do need to know like where you're at. And in a lot of these vitamins, I've heard it said before, I've said it before, like for a lot of them, you have to take a whole lot to overdose. Like, it's like nearly impossible on a vitamin that's like naturally in your body to overdose. Like your body's just going to get rid of the rest, the excess.
Correct.
And so like, all it hurts is your pocketbook to say, I don't know if I'm you can go get tests done, of course, and all that stuff. But if you can research it and go, okay, well, vitamin D is supposed to help with this. Just take a whole lot of it for a week and see if it makes you feel any different.
It's right? Exactly.
Like you can do some of this stuff on your own.
Number past 100, because past 100 is considered a little too high.
Right.
But even around then, for you to get that number, you'd really be having to pump a lot of vitamin D into your body. Right. And there's only 4 vitamins that can technically be overdosed. It's A, D, E, and K. But most people don't supplement with K. Right. Some people, and E, again, how much vitamin E are you going to take? So a lot of people don't have that risk of overdosing.
Right.
And I agree with you. And the other thing is, I mean, again, I'm not a huge, I used to take a ton of supplements, but then I realized to that degree, I'm like, well, where's the end point in that? I'm taking, 30 pills a day. I was like, that's not sustainable to me after a while either. But one thing I'm huge about, and I know you are because of what you just said about your dietary habits, is inflammation, right? Inflammation is huge. And most people are subject to processed and boxed foods. And I'm no stranger to them. I just happen to cook a lot. So I don't make shortcuts with boxed stuff that often, but it's still in my diet.
Sure.
And I guess my point is that all comes down to your microbiome, and your body serotonin is considered a feel-good chemical in your body, right? We have others too, dopamine, serotonin, but specifically serotonin. Something I didn't know until after I left the hospital, over 70% of your serotonin is created in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I can understand why eating disorders happen because, again, or at least the people who overeat, because again, they, instead of doing a drug, which they are hesitant to do and don't want to get sick with, they're gaining serotonin of something feel good with the food. And of course, as the tolerance level rises, right?
Yep.
But if your microbiome is severely affected by the things you're eating, the amount of the gut flora in your body almost takes up a large majority of the amount of bacteria that are in your body altogether. Oh, yeah. So for me, one of the biggest things is change your gut health, change your gut health. And I don't know what to believe of this because, again, I'm in the placebo effect category. So I'm all about people trying things that maybe a mainstream doctor would say is baloney. I'm like, no, do it. Do it.
Right.
I'm like, do it. Because if you believe in that, I guarantee you something's going to change. So, you know, some ladies started talking about how all they were doing was taking an over-the-counter probiotic and they started losing weight. But it makes sense to me because now they're shifting the gut flora in a little bit more desirable, and they're kicking out the ones that are depending on like the inflammatory foods, et cetera.
Right.
And which means less fluid uptake, which means less less tissue damage, oxidative damage.
Right.
And it may not be fat pounds. It may just be fluid and inflammation that they're losing. Who knows? But I don't think anybody who's trying to lose weight wouldn't be cool with that. They'd be like, okay, let's try it.
Right. Yeah.
For what? For something that's so minimal,
Right. Yeah. Whatever moves the scale. Like
exactly. And I realized too, again, since I've been kind of caught up in this whole, now that I'm in the cosmetic industry, people want shortcuts all the time, right?
Yeah.
And my instinct says, I don't want to give it to them.
Right.
I don't feel good about it. Right. My Hippocratic oath says, nope, this is just me leaning on pharmaceutical industry again. It doesn't feel good. So some people are really into this new weight loss drug. I don't even want to say the name.
Right.
But there's other people who are all about it. I've had several patients and my instinct says, nope, stay as far away from it as possible.
Right.
I don't know. My trust in that method is very low now. I personally have been medicated with a variety of things after, my head injury, my neck surgery. They were poison.
Right. Yeah.
They were poison. And the only way I could ever say those things is by personal experience. And I think that's one thing a lot of doctors are lacking is they're writing these scripts for things they have zero personal experience.
Right.
And not realizing that it's doing more harm than good in the long term. So
right. Well, and it's funny because like as a health coach myself, one of the things that I do, and one of the reasons why I'm doing the raw vegan right now is that like I've had some people ask me about it. I've interviewed some people that have done it. And so it's like, well, I'm not going to teach you how to do it unless I've done it and seen like, does it work?
Sure.
Right. And so like, unless it's, if it's something that's, illegal or I know that it's going to cause damage, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to tell you don't do it. It's hello.
Yeah.
But like, if it's like, oh, well, there's something, let's try that. Like, I'm going to try it first and be like, okay, let's experiment with this. Let's see how it makes you feel. Cause then I can realistically tell you, oh, you're going to go through 3 days of like hell before you come out the other side and you're going to feel fine. So if you're on day 2 and you are telling me that this doesn't work, you still got another day before you're going to get to the better side or something like that.
Or whatnot. Right.
But and a lot of times though, the doctors if they haven't experienced it, they haven't had that specific drug for whatever the reason is, they don't know. When you call up and you say, hey, I'm having this side effect, is this, oh, well, that's what it says on the bottle.
Oh, well, that's rare. The book says it's rare.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and the other thing is that when you were talking about the medications and stuff, it reminded me of when COVID first started coming out and, there are press conferences every day of what's going on. And I remember it because I cut the piece out of the video and I shared it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, you have to listen to me. This is because they were interviewing Dr. Fauci, and I'm not trying to go one way or the other with him, but he said something that I don't. If he went back, he'd probably not want to say it because of the implications of it for the whole pharmaceutical industry. But in that moment when he was being pinned down, like, you're thinking about coming out with a vaccine, da da da.
Right.
And he said, "Oh well, all medication is toxic." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" He said, like, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I can't believe that he but it's because it's so every medication has a piece of toxic piece, there's a piece to it. Because like you said before, it's all petroleum based in some form or format. It's laboratory created. There's pieces to it that are just not supposed to be in your body.
We are being led to believe that is the avenue for healing, and it's not.
Right.
And I'm here to whistleblow and say human capacity to heal is extremely powerful, and it starts with belief. Period.
Right.
And then here's the other thing. You talk about medicine, but really, wouldn't you say this is everywhere in terms of like you get advice from somebody or they'll tell you what to do and what not to do, but not even based on personal experience? Or let's say it was. Let's just say it was. That's their set of, like, we go back to projection, their history, their vibrational state, their level of happiness and whatever. And if they tell you, it's like I don't remember the quote, but it's something about how the warrior in the arena and somebody from the audience is telling him that, but he's not the warrior.
Right.
So it always should come back to what feels right to you. And there should literally be no person that is a higher authority of you than you. Right. No person, not a parent, not a boss, not a doctor, nobody. You are your own greatest authority. So if somebody told me snowboarding is bad for me, I'm going to break my wrist, and I believe them, then I wouldn't be doing my most favorite sport that I learned at 33, and now I can go anywhere and double black diamonds and riding trees and the joy it's brought me. Yeah. So there's so many experiences that I wouldn't have had, even though I spent most of my childhood and early adulthood being somebody else's show pony. I relied heavily on approval from others to feel worthy. This is what I'm telling you about with this fall has become the ultimate test of that. Like, do you really need that? Right. Are you constantly, is your conversation you're having or the text you're sending or the video you're sending to this person because you're trying to increase value with that person? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I like these patterns of behavior that I'm so asleep to, I'm finally like recognizing that, oh my God, you don't need to, no, you don't need to say that. It's cool. Just keep, but again, making it more about you. And so I'll give you an example. I had, cause again, wouldn't you say dietary opinions can be somewhat emotional, right? Like people get really defensive and angry about it. And shame one another for their practices. And then again, it's ultimately like what feels good to you, right? And so I remember sitting at a business building conference, sitting down with, I think I had some chicken and a salad and maybe some sweet potatoes or something on my plate. And the couple that had invited me, the husband is not in the medical field, but he helps his wife who is, or something. I don't really remember. But they have, and she told me about it, but I mean, that's their thing. It's fine. Right. They're big into this diet where they eat almost all meat and no vegetables and no fruit. I don't know what it's called, but anyways, I sit down and he wanted to tell me something. Right. Are you really going to eat that? Something, and this, that, and he was ready to give me like the whatever it was, like the little spiel about why what I'm doing is wrong and what he's doing is right. And I looked at him and I'm like, cool. And I said, yeah, I'm going to eat it. And I just proceeded to shove my face. He was you could tell he was really upset about that. The fact that I wouldn't take, but I'm thinking that's not how you're going to gain value with somebody. Right. I mean, and again, he doesn't know my life experiences, my background, what I've learned. And
Yeah.
I'm not there to tell him and defend myself either. I'm like, hey, that's cool you feel that way, but I'm going to eat this.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that I've got a friend who is also a client that we've known each other for years, and then another mutual friend who just became a client a couple months ago, and talking with the new client and helping him through things. And then I heard they went to lunch a couple weeks ago, and we're just talking, and I came up, and they were like, and he was like, oh yeah, well, I was a client, he taught me up how to eat and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so my friend, who's the long-term client, he was like, well, Jerry's vegan, right? And he was like, the other guy was like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been his client for 2 months. He hasn't said a word about that. And I'm like, yeah, because I don't want to project what makes me feel good onto you. I'm going to teach you how to eat better. Like, but I'm not one of those people that says like, you have to like get rid of all the meat processing plants and all this stuff's bad. Like, no, I mean, because I've got people in my family that eat, that grow their own cows, like,
right,
on their own farm. So there's the whole gamut in my family. And I'm like, I'm not going to push that edge, but I'm going to teach you, if you eat these things in more abundance in like the vibrational foods, if you eat those things, you're going to feel better, and you're going to naturally start moving away from other things. Doesn't mean you're going to give up meat altogether. Nobody, I'm not telling you to do that. I don't care if you do that or not, but I have people that do want to do that. So I need to see what it feels like. And for me, I feel it feels better for me. So that's the way I go.
That's why you did it.
But I don't project it on anybody else.
You're teaching somebody who's actually curious, but again, you can't. Let's go right back to COVID. I know we keep going back to that, but cognitive dissonance is powerful, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's really no amount of evidence you're going to be able to show somebody if they're not open to a concept.
Right.
There's no amount, and they will resist you, and they will find other ways to justify in their head, because ultimately a person is easier to fool than to admit they've been fooled.
Right.
So they're going to fight you tooth and nail. I am not here to wake up people like that.
Right.
I'm here for people who are already like curious to, this is a possibility of healing. Because surely I've encountered patients who are highly dependent on the system, had like a list of 30 meds. The only options that they knew of was to do the route that I knew all along.
Right.
Those people aren't going to learn much from me. I'm not going to be able to read a chapter in this book and they're like, oh yeah, that's me. They're not going to see it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, again, I'm here about being the change like you are, as opposed to forcing change on others. That doesn't work that well.
Right. Yeah. I'm just here for when they open the door. And that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast, is that like, I just want to promote the different opportunities and avenues, because something's going to hit with somebody and they're going to go, oh, let me open that door and see if it leads them to a healthier life. And, and if it does, then that's a little drop that can start a ripple effect, in their little group, and hopefully start changing, this attitude towards, what this, like, I don't know how many billions and trillions of industry, the pharmaceutical industry is, to more of a, I can actually take more charge of my own life and my own health.
Totally.
And so, man, we've covered so much stuff. It's been so much fun.
It's the stuff we love to talk about.
I know. It's like, and one other thing you had mentioned about Tylenol and fever reduction. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure I mentioned is that, so I got very unusually, like for the first time in like 5 years, I got sick back in September. I know it was September because I was getting ready to go to New Jersey for a race. And I got sick right before it. And I was like the weekend before, I got a sinus infection. And I was like, what is wrong? Where did I mess up?
Yeah.
I obviously did something wrong in my prep from a nutrition standpoint. And I'm like racking my brain. And then I remembered that like I stopped taking my daily dose of honey, which I know is like when people say vegan and they say honey, and I prefer to just take it. It's not an animal product in my world, but but I stopped doing that because I was feeling great. And I was like, I wonder if I need this. Well, in our area of Central Texas, like it's like a bowl, and so the wind just blows all the allergens in the area.
Mm,
And so, without taking that to support my immune response to allergens,
yeah.
I got a sinus infection and got a fever. And my wife was like, "You should probably take something. Like you should probably." And my argument was like, "Okay, there's a level where a fever's high enough where you should seek medical care for it because it just gets too high and you're going to have major problems, organ failures, and things like that. Most of us will never get there."
No, we
And
don't.
so I'm like, well, my normal temperature runs a little low. I usually run in the 97.1, 97.2 range. And so I had a 99 fever, and she's like, you should take something for that. And I was
Right.
like, no, I'll be fine because
Mhm.
the fever is my body's reaction in
Exactly.
fighting the disease or
Exactly.
the whatever the infection is. And so if I squash that in an unnatural way, I'm just prolonging the effect of the infection, right?
Yes, you are, in my opinion as well.
And so I was
I,
like,
I
let me just
believe in
fight through
letting
it.
the fever ride.
Yeah,
And honestly, as an ER doctor for 20 years, I've literally never heard of a life-threatening fever.
right,
So let's just say there are fevers that can be severe enough that somebody is going to maybe have a seizure even,
right.
but that's very, very, very rare.
Yeah,
It's more common in children. And then
right,
secondly, if your fever is running that high for a period of time, there's other things you need to be worrying about. The fever is just a sign. It's not the
right,
problem.
right,
So most of us may get fevers with some kind of flu-like illness up to 102, 103. But, even when I was a kid, I remember as soon as I let my body do what it needed to do, it would like burst through a threshold, if you
right,
will. Because
right.
again, if it was a disease process that my body could cure, which most diseases can be like that,
Mhm.
then yeah. But if you're constantly fighting something day in, day out, and it's not going away, then maybe you are dealing with something not viral. Maybe it
Right,
is bacterial. Maybe it does need medicine. And I get
right,
that.
right,
But again, like you said, you shouldn't have to take a pill for everything that happens to your body. And I
right.
used to be that person too.
Yeah.
I had a pill for everything,
Mhm.
to the point where my sister got me a little bag that says, I have a pill for that.
Oh, so you've totally changed direction completely.
Oh,
Like,
I'm unrecognizable to some people
yeah,
probably in some ways because, yeah. I mean, I use things like sound therapy.
right.
Yeah, I use binaural beats. I don't know if you've heard of the Monroe Institute. He's all about bilateral
Yep,
brain
yep.
stimulation. I love that stuff. Um, I love meditating, but I gotta admit that I've kind of gotten out of the habit just based on what I've been doing on a daily basis. But I'm huge. I'm a huge proponent of that.
Yeah,
So I feel like I even had a patient that came for lipo consult who fought ulcerative colitis for many years. She was on lots of drugs. She felt like she was getting sicker. She never felt better.
mhm.
Then she gained a bunch of weight from steroid use, right? Because they put
Right.
her on a
Yep.
bunch of steroids. And ultimately, I think that was like her tipping point. She's like, I'm done. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't know what exactly triggered her to change her pursuit of health and wellness, but she took control
Yeah.
and decided she's to stop going to the doctor and she started changing her nutritional habits, her supplements. She started getting into some of the more esoteric healing type techniques. And I can't remember how many years it's been. It's been several years for her, but she's basically in remission now.
Yeah.
And takes no medicine, none.
Right.
When she said, I had a countertop full of them for a
Right.
long time.
Yep.
I think, for us being the change is for the people who are inspired by that, they'll come to us,
Oh, yeah.
your vibe attracts your tribe, right?
Yep.
So clearly people start approaching you more and more when they start seeing like, hey, she's still looking well. She's still putting out the same positive energy. Like everything on my social media is all about feeling
Right.
better and all those things. Consistent.
Yep.
So somebody who's really interested in that realm of thinking is going to approach you for it eventually. They'll be like, okay, tell me more. Tell
Right.
me more about what you're doing. you know, those are the people I want to teach.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on an hour, and I want to respect your time, but I want to give you the opportunity to, promote yourself. Like, how can people get in touch with you? If they've got questions and they're like, she was speaking my language. I need to learn more.
Absolutely. So, I have a cosmetic surgery office here in Scottsdale, Arizona. We also have a satellite IV place in Phoenix, Arizona, like in Ahwatukee.
Okay.
It's Vital Connection MD, and you can call our office and learn more about my mainstay of treatment, which is high definition liposuction and fat transfers, which is very unique in what I do because 80% of liposuction is what you would see on TV, and I don't represent that category. I represent the other 20%.
Okay.
Where there's a lot more opportunity, a lot more people are candidates than they think. And when you start changing the perceptions in your body, you can really have an impact. Again, we all, as much as we might exercise and diet, we all have some problem areas. And I love being able to help people get rid of those problem areas so they can focus on their overall wellness. Right. Outside of that, I'm an expert in personal development. And so I'm really big on mind body healing and coaching. And so many people can find all aspects of me, both comedic and personal development and surgical, on my Instagram page, which is vital_connection_MD. And then my website, which you mentioned earlier, also has blogs and a variety of pieces of information that are just about feeling well in life and being holistically feeling better. So that is vitalconnectionmd.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bilge, for being on. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, it is.
I love connecting to people that think the same way that I do, but also learning, because there's things that I can always learn from people that, like you said, you've got your niche and you're happy to refer people to other things if it's outside of that. And I think that's one of the things that people need to learn about the holistic side of health. Is it just like, if you're going to the old system of medical care and you go to your primary and then they say, oh, well, you need to see a cardiologist or oncologist or whatever, you need to see a specialist. The same type of thing can happen in the holistic realm, in that, you see this person for nutrition. Oh, you need to go see this person for your meditation expertise, or this person for that, and all those different things. And so it's great to connect with people with that same mindset.
There's certainly something you can learn from anybody from all walks of life. I'm not here to say that an MD is the authority on a lot of things, as we have clearly discussed. But I've learned a lot from my patients, and basically it comes down to instinct and personal experience, right?
Right.
And so the things that I've been able to teach my patients that are the most impactful come from my personal experience.
Right.
So awesome. Anyways, a lot to learn from everybody. And I'm grateful to be able to have that opportunity to teach, but also to learn. So thank you. You've taught me some things too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out the All in Health and Wellness Confidence Through Health podcast. Our goal is to use health as a conduit to help you reach your goals in life.
A little lighter than me. I'm about to black out. Her grip is getting tighter on me. I think I like it deep inside. I feel the fire in me. She like the milky, see me cream into the coffee in me. She got soul in her sway.